that it was deliberately dropped to be found.
Possible.
If
Note
it was,
to all of our listeners,
then
if you're in the jungle
why with all that
or
stuff?
the woods,
Was
never
it?
eat
Oh my gosh,
mushroom.
was it?
Red
Yeah,
herring,
don't
though.
do
That's actually not a
worth
fantastic
it.
Unless
amount of
you
stuff
know
that's still
100%.
leaving
Well,
the
no,
It's not, but it's a
mushrooms
weird
basically
assortment of
have
stuff. It's not that it's that much, it's
caloric
just a lot of
value,
random stuff.
So
And
it's not
somebody said
worth
that
even
the,
taking the chance.
Not worth
Just-
the
just-
combination
just don't
of
do
the
it.
intent
If I were
of this
here,
message
That's the
there
fact
are-
of the day.
Okay,
wasn't
don't do
messaging
it.
them,
Just
so
don't do it.
Just don't do it. But love. Seriously.
I mean, it's
I
possible.
didn't originate that one, but you got the lips, and the
Yeah.
exclamation points, and then puppy love.
I mean, it's possible.
Yeah.
That's
I don't
weird.
know.
I don't even know what that means. But okay, all right. Okay.
So, yeah, I guess all we can do is really hope that this case will be solved in the next year or two as the trial of Owens continues.
If Owens did it.
If Owens did it.
I mean, 'cause-
certainly...
And he might not even know anything about it. I mean, he's
It's-
certainly after what happened in March, he's certainly my favorite candidate now.
But he also must know
something.
at least a little more given the call that he placed 2 days later.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a
because
little suspicious.
either Zeb was truly alive and called him and said, "Hey dude, call in for me," or he wasn't and he just decided to place a call for whatever reason, right? I think if somebody says, "I know I'm on death row, but no, I'm sticking to my story about what happened to Zeb," you can probably trust what they're saying.
Well, the other hard part, though, this is my concern with this offer of a bargain, is he may just fess up just to get off a death row.
That's true, too.
They usually require proof, like, "Hey, tell us where you buried the body then."
Right, you got to be able to prove something, but I always am hesitant with those things because that's what I would do if I got convicted and went to death row. Not that I'm gonna do something, I swear you to.
Yeah, right.
Don't have those drinks. But if I was gonna do something and I did go to death row and they said, "Oh, hey, Steve, we think you did this other thing." Thinking Sideways is not brought to you by the incessant wheezing of a grumble of pigs. Instead, it's supported by the generous donations of our listeners on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/thinkingsideways to learn more. And thanks.
Thinking Sideways.
I don't understand.
Does not compute.
You never know.
Insufficient data to formulate a reply.
What?
Stories of things we simply don't know the answer to.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Thinking Sideways, the podcast.
Where Steve interrupts.
Where Steve interrupts constantly every day.
Sorry.
I'm Devin, joined by Steve and
The interrupter.
Joe.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
It's going to be a long episode. It's not actually going to be that long of an episode.
That's going to be pretty short.
It just is going to if Steve keeps interrupting.
What?
Yeah. Today we're going to talk
What
about...
are we talking about?
It reminds me of a joke.
Okay, let's go. Sorry.
Today we're going to talk about...
It's just because you had a candy bar earlier and I couldn't help but interrupt because of that. But you know what? I should let you go ahead and talk about this story because this one's a fun one.
Oh, it is. No, it's a very good one. It's highly dramatic, lots of death and destruction.
Cyborgs from the future?
But I really
No?
need it. Knock, knock.
This week we're going to talk about the disappearance of Benjamin Bathurst. This was a suggestion by Ash.
Hey, Ash.
England. We're working through those suggestions.
Ash, I hope you're still listening.
I think he is. I think he emailed us last time.
Did he?
Pretty sure.
Okay.
Maybe not.
Well, Ash, when you hear this, come on, send us an email.
Yeah,
Let us know
geez,
you're
man.
still alive.
So the quick overview for this story is that a minor British diplomat named Benjamin Bathurst vanished almost literally into thin air while traveling under an assumed name with intendant in 1809
In Germany.
in Germany while fleeing Austria. Cool?
Vienna?
Yeah.
He's fleeing from Vienna.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is in Austria.
Yeah.
It is.
Part of. Okay, yeah. All right, let's start with Benjamin. Yeah?
Quickly.
Great. Benjamin was born on March 18th.
And then he was 25 when he disappeared. Pretty young,
25.
actually, to be a diplomat.
He was actually very young to be a diplomat.
Yeah, it's a little weird.
I think he was like 17 or 18 when he became a diplomat. He was part of the Bathurst family. Surprise!
Yeah.
His father was the Right Reverend Henry Bathurst, and he was the Bishop of Norwich. That's pretty cool lineage. No? You guys aren't impressed? Okay, never mind.
I am.
He was the third son in his family, so he had 2 older brothers, and then he had a sister, and I don't actually know. I think she was younger.
I was going to say, I thought the sister was younger, but I
think
never
so,
actually
just-
paid attention enough.
Well, I don't think that I've ever seen it anywhere written.
Well, that
how
makes
old
me
she
feel better
was,
then.
but I just know from stuff that we know from like
What?
50 years later, she was still kind of looking for her brother.
And that's
I-
Tryphena, right?
No, that's Philida.
Well, Philida. Okay.
Philida Call, I think is her.
Oh, I thought that was his wife.
Is it?
Yeah.
Am I getting the two mixed up? Okay, it's the sister that had the awesome last name?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I got him totally backwards then.
You did. So yeah, he was married to a woman named Philida Call.
Sorry for the spoiler.
Gosh, jeez. And I don't think that they had kids.
No, I don't
As
think
far
so.
as I know, he became a diplomat, quote unquote, at an early age, but it was definitely before he was 21. And then he married in 1805 when he was 21. He had already been a diplomat for a couple years at that point, so really at a really young age. I've heard him as described as very talented and really smart, and just
Sounds
overall, like actually qualified to be a diplomat, not just he had a good family.
I was going to say that there's two kinds of diplomats at this time. There is the you have inherited this job, no matter how terrible you are at it, or you actually have a talent.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so-
Usually third sons don't inherit
very true.
diplomacies, diplomatic charges.
Diplomatic posts. But,
Diplomatic posts.
Well, he wasn't exactly a he was more kind of like an envoy.
Well, that's true,
Yeah,
I guess.
but still. Kind
But
of
the thing is
diplomatic.
about diplomats at that time is that if you do reading of historical stuff, they would have the ability to solve problems, so grievances of their monarch.
Mm-hmm.
They would go in and they could agree to the terms on behalf of their monarch. Now, they still had to go home
Obviously.
and get the monarch to buy into it.
That would be months
But it-
later. But yeah,
right,
I
but
mean,
it's-
obviously they had to be able to do that because he didn't have a phone. You know, you
Right,
couldn't
but
call
yeah, I was going to
people
say,
up,
it's not
yeah.
like today where it's like, let me call the boss and double check that he's okay with it. They had the power, so to entrust it to a guy that young, he had to know what he was doing and have some skill.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
sure, yeah.
So in 1809, Benjamin was sent to Vienna, and as a reminder, 1809 is like in the very middle years of the Napoleonic War, and it was when the fifth
Wars. Not Napoleonic War. Napoleonic Wars, because he was
Wars.
making war everywhere.
everywhere. That's
He
true.
was a talented guy too.
Yeah, he was a talented little guy. So this was right when the Fifth Coalition formed in that year, and this, of course, meant, like everybody knows this, but this meant that an English diplomat like Bathurst needed to get out of Vienna, and pretty quick.
So, for people who don't know what the Fifth Coalition is,
That was between Britain and Austria.
in Austria, because
Yeah.
France is trying to take over all of Europe and they are warring everywhere, and the Brits would not back down. England wasn't going to back down, and they were making allies with anybody that they had, and the name the Fifth Coalition should lead you to recognize that there had been a first, a second, a third,
Oh, yeah.
and a fourth coalition prior to this coalition. So they were bringing on allies to stand against Napoleon on a pretty regular basis. Now, the Fifth Coalition, I think, what did it last? 3 or 4 years? Not very long.
Not very long.
Yeah, it was very short-lived. But
No, it wasn't even years. It was from April 10th to October 14th, 1908.
the Fifth Coalition. I thought there was
1908
some-
or 1809.
I'm sorry, 1809.
Okay.
Okay, because I swore it was one that had gone on for longer, but there were prior ones that
You're
had
mixing
managed to
up your
stand for
coalitions.
years. But so everybody that wasn't French was standing up against the French.
Or
Oh,
trying
I'm
to.
sorry. The dates I just gave you, that was the War of the Fifth Coalition.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes me feel better.
Sorry.
Regardless, though, the Fifth Coalition, they had a couple of years under their belt before Napoleon literally squashed the whole thing.
Yeah.
But this is, this is one of those times where it's just war upon war.
Yeah,
Although this was
but,
the beginning of the downhill slide for Napoleon.
yeah, and eventually, of course, he was sent off to exile, and eventually he came back and said, "Hello, remember me?" and started all over again. We'll talk about that later on, the mystery of Napoleon.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
There is some mystery there.
Uh-huh.
So in mid-November of 1809 is when Bathurst decided he really needed to get out of there.
Out of Vienna.
Yeah, he
That's because Austria had flicked it in, right? They had surrendered to Napoleon, correct?
yeah, actually I know that Steve did a lot of research on this. I did a lot of research on this, but I bet Steve's notes are a little better than mine. So let's have like Uncle Steve's story time about a little bit of the stuff that was happening around the Napoleonic Wars in Vienna at the
Okay,
time.
because I didn't. Well, this is one of those things where I always rely on Joe to go super crazy on the military campaigns, and then I ended up falling down the rabbit hole.
Fun stuff,
It really is. It's
interesting.
It's strange because what happens is the Fifth Coalition is going on, and Napoleon gets wind of it, and he's none too happy, and he brings his army to Vienna. At this point, he occupies Vienna. This is in May of 1809. He occupies Vienna, and he thinks he's put down any resistance, yada yada yada, and everything's hunky dory. And then he's got obviously got a bunch of other campaigns going on. So he leaves Vienna, and a large portion of his troop force leaves. Well, it turns out the Fifth Coalition, this is when they're stirring up all this trouble, and they make trouble. I guess that's the best way to put it. They make trouble. At this point, Napoleon realizes that he has to truly come back, and he truly has to put down what is going on in Vienna.
Yeah.
And I believe that it's pronounced the Battle of Wagram.
Sounds right.
Okay. And that took place between the 5th and the 6th of July of 1809. And it's a weird battle because it literally took 2 days. Napoleon shows up. He fords his army across the river in the middle of the night, thinking he's got the upper hand. But this is when guns are really becoming prevalent, and cannons, and there are casualties somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 70,000 men total each side combined. But Napoleon ends up getting the win, not clearly, but he gets the win. A bunch of the generals that are fighting against him on the Austrian side flee, they chase, some of them get killed, some of them get captured, but it's a really weird battle in the fact that it took such a short amount of time. And even stranger is that, go figure, as a dictator, Napoleon lied about the whole thing to the French people. In other words, he told them that he had lost maybe 2,000 men. Maybe 2,500 men, but the enemy had suffered massive casualties.
I'm not surprised. That's and how are the French people going to find out?
Well, they're not. Except that my husband didn't come home. Well, he was one of the 2,000, or he died in another campaign. But that's why I said earlier it was the beginning of the downhill slide for him, because he wasn't getting these crazy decisive wins like he had in his early campaign.
Yeah, he lost a little momentum there.
But that's obviously that's the problem you were talking about with Bathurst initially, is that he's got to get out of town.
Yeah, so
because Napoleon's coming to town and nobody likes Napoleon.
Napoleon didn't like the Brits.
No.
Yeah.
The War of the Fifth Coalition ended on October 14th of 1809, and that's when Austria ceded to Napoleon, basically. And there was a little bit of a scuffle until early November 1809, when finally the French Bavarian army really defeated Austria in the Peninsular War.
One other bit of kind of geographical history that I think that we need to talk about, this, and I'll keep this really brief for this story, is that the northwest portion of that area was known as the Federation of the Rhine, and it was composed of like 19 kind of city-states, which had all put their fealty towards Napoleon because they had already lost to him previously.
Are you talking about the northern parts of Austria?
I'm talking about from Vienna north. There's a band just to the west of Vienna. There's a band, if you look at on the 1809 maps, and they just put it in this weird little grouping, but it is made up of all these individual areas that were run by
like barons or whatever.
they were barons and princes who under Napoleon went ahead and consolidated power in these small areas, but officially they were loyal to Napoleon. So this is something to keep in mind, because this is the area that our dear little Mr. Bathurst is going to be treading through.
Yeah. So Bathurst decides again in like early mid-November that, okay, it's time to get on out of here. And remember, again, this is, 1809. We're not talking like hop on a train and hop on a... Well, I mean, you could have hopped on a train, but we're not talking like hop in your own car, because just like you're a British diplomat, it's hard to get on a train safely.
Well, there weren't that many of them either.
No, definitely not, unless you're a soldier, in which case maybe there were some more. But anyway, he had a German courier or attendant, depending on like what you believe / read, how this person is described. I'm going to say attendant. His name was Herr Kraus.
Mr. Kraus.
Mr. Kraus.
Yeah.
They decided, rightly so probably, to move under assumed aliases because, duh. So Benjamin Bathurst went by Baron de Kock.
Baron de Kock.
Went by Baron de Kock. And Herr Kraus went by Fisher. Benjamin made no contact with the British consul when he was traveling. This guy's name was Galway Mills when he arrived in Berlin, because he did arrive in Berlin from Austria to Berlin, Germany.
Now, he was heading north to catch a boat to head to England, right?
Maybe.
Presumably.
Some of the accounts that you'll read say that he was headed to the Baltic Sea. Mm-hmm. Some of the accounts you'll see said, no, he was gonna go south after a while, and some of the accounts you read say like, we don't know where he was going.
He was doing a crazy overland journey.
He was just gonna go overland the entire time, all the way up to England.
He was actually originally considering going south to the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
Which in hindsight, he probably should have done.
Been a good idea.
Yeah.
How many times have we said that on this show? Mm-hmm. In hindsight, if they'd only gone the other way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Benjamin hits Berlin, but he doesn't go to see the British consul there, which probably would have been a good idea.
That is very unusual.
Yeah, I mean, you guys know, I hope our listeners understand how diplomacy works, but you would want to check in with the consuls if you're a diplomat, especially if you were fleeing, unless you really didn't
have time.
Well, okay, so he wasn't, as it turns out, because he did deliver 2 letters. So he had time to deliver the letters, but he didn't have time to even stop and drop a letter to the consul there and say like, hey, passing through, super in danger, bye.
I've also read that, if he's not going to drop by the consul, I would presume his plan is to stay under to stay in cover.
Yeah.
To not break cover. And yet some of the reading that I've done made it clear that it was pretty obvious that everybody knew that he was in town. It wasn't as if it was a secret, which is, that's counter to trying to stay in your role of being in your cover. If you're then be like, hey, it's me, Benjamin. Hey, here's your letter. I gotta go. I'm gonna be staying at the inn over here, and you know me because I got this fancy pin in my hat. Bye.
Well, I gotta say, he did not practice great tradecraft.
No,
I mean, he
really didn't.
He changed his name and nothing else, and he wore very distinctive clothes and drove a distinctive carriage. Mm-hmm. He would have been wise to perhaps adopt a better disguise than just changing his name.
I agree.
Yeah.
And we'll talk a little bit about that whole situation in a minute. But so, he did stop in Berlin. He delivered 2 letters to 2 separate gentlemen, but again, didn't stop at the consul. He also changed horses in Berlin and hung out for a while. And this is the first time you see a date enter this story. So we have to make assumptions up until this point. But it is known, I guess, that he left Berlin on November 15th. So that gives him 10 days to get to the next stop.
Which is strange because Perleberg, where he disappeared, is only 100 miles northwest of Berlin. Strange it would take him 10 days to get there.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, sorry. My number is based out of Vienna, and I was like, no, it's 500 miles.
500 miles from Vienna.
No, it's 500 miles from Vienna, not from Berlin.
Well, he might have made some other stops on the way.
He
must have,
did.
really.
I mean, he must have. He had to have.
And what kind of vehicle was he using for travel?
Yeah, he was traveling by a shay, or it's spelled like chase.
It's a 2-horse carriage, right?
It can be 2. It could be 1 horse carriage, but they're real little. I mean, they're the open front ones. It's not an enclosed.
And it's got like just 2 wheels and not 4, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes they have 3, but I think the 3 ones that you see are actually like driven a little bit.
Would it be kind of similar to like a rickshaw?
Similar.
Except with a horse instead of a dude?
Yeah, and a little bigger.
Okay.
But yeah, it's not like luxury travel. Although in the book that his sister tripped